welcome. You're watching the Newshour Agenda. I'm Padmaja Joshi. In fact, the Indian government today gently reminded our friendly nations that cooperation, freedom, security and diplomacy is a two-way street. After the High Commission in London was attacked by Khalistan goons on Sunday and the tricolour was pulled down, India today removed the barricades outside the British High Commission in India and also the house of the British High Commissioner Alex Ellis. Without compromising on its security commitments, the Indian establishment did away with any of the extra reinforcements that had been put outside any of these buildings in the national capital. Remember, India had been livid after its High Commission was attacked by Khalistani extremists on Sunday night. In a strongly worded statement, we demand an explanation for the complete absence of British security and how basic obligations under the Vienna Convention were ignored. And it seems that the message has finally hit home. Today, when the same bunch of goons decided to again march to the Indian High Commission, they were met with barricades and a police patrol. The number of policemen deployed outside the High Commission had been beefed up significantly and all protesters had been pushed to the other side of the road. The question though is, has India done enough to send the message across that it is no pushover and security of Indian assets is non-negotiable? Why did it take this firm message by India for the UK to finally live up to its security obligations? And finally, will it now also walk the talk and arrest all of the vandals who were behind the shameful Sunday episode?
You're watching the News Hour at 10, debate number 1 on Times Now, Super Prime Time.
All right, joining us now is Sohail Seth columnist, Sukhi Chahal, founder, CEO and editor-in-chief of the Khalsa Story, Saurav Dutt, author and political analyst, Anirban Banerjee and Vivek Srivastav, also both political analysts. But I want to start with you, Andrew MacLeod, visiting professor of war studies at King's College London. It's a basic obligation of the British government. Why did it take for India to actually remove the security or remove some of the barricades outside of the British High Commission for them to finally get the cops out?
I think I need to make a couple of points clear. Firstly, as an Australian, I'm not a British representative or in any way a representative of the British government. The second thing I need to make clear is in London, they're used to large protests of hundreds of thousands of people. And by any measure, this protest on Sunday and the one again today of a couple of dozen people is on physical size, tiny, tiny and small. Third thing to make note of is violence must be condemned all the time. And yes, under the Vienna Convention, host states have the responsibility of ensuring the safety of all diplomatic facilities with, though, the help of the diplomatic country themselves. For example, the Americans know it was harder and harder to protect their embassy in central London, so they moved it to a more secure location. Aldwych, where the Indian High Commission is, I'm very familiar with it. It's right outside King's College. It's just next door to the Australian High Commission. Maybe it's time, if India thinks they're going to be a target, that maybe it's time to think of a more secure location for the High Commission. But yes, the British did respond today and they did put barricades out, again reinforcing what a small crowd it was, that they were on the other side of the road. This is hardly an attack against an embassy facility. The other thing we must note is the law and culture around the national flag is very different in the United Kingdom from in India. In India, it's illegal to desecrate a flag. In the United Kingdom, they turn their flag into underpants. So for the British, it's very hard to understand why a flag is a big issue, because for the British, it is not a big issue. It was a small crowd and the flag was not a big issue for the British, and the window being smashed should be condemned. But really, from the outside, this doesn't look like India asserting its pride. This looks like India creating a storm out of a teacup, and what should be a strong and proud country now looks petulant by removing the extra protections outside the British High Commissioner's residence and the British High Commission. This is a great shame.
Well, it's a storm in a teacup, but if somebody was to actually enter the building and they smashed the windows, they smashed the glass there. One person was...
And they've been arrested.
One person has been arrested. One person has been arrested.
Correct.
There are at least 50 to 100 people in that mob.
Yes,
one guy has been arrested.
Yes, but not everybody in the crowd of protesters is responsible for one person smashing the glass. The person who's responsible for smashing the glass has been arrested just as you called for. Look, this really makes India look weak to an outsider. I'm an Australian. I'm a neutral in this. I look at this and I go, why are the Indians reacting this way? It makes them look weak.
Well, it is because if somebody tries to enter the High Commission, it's not necessary that they'll stop there. What if they came there with an IED? Who's to know? There wasn't a single cop there at the time. Who's to know?
I have been.
They smashed glasses. They could have attacked the guy.
Yeah. And which major city in the world knows that more than London? I've been within 500 metres of 5 terrorist attacks in my life, major terrorist attacks. 4 of them were in London. 4 of them were in London. The British understand terrorism very, very well, from the IRA through the 7/7 bombing.
Nobody deserves to be attacked by terrorists, but here the case is also slightly different from what happened to you, because this is a diplomatic establishment. This is literally under the Vienna Convention. And let me leave everything else aside. Let's leave everything else aside. If security was not needed,
India-UK relations.
Why was it put there today? The barricades we saw today. Sohail Seth responding to you. Is it a storm in a teacup, Sohail Seth?
First, Andrew, if I may call you Andrew, I'm amazed at the nonchalance with which you've just spoken. You know, for you to sit there, say, oh, I'm neutral, I'm Australian, and therefore I have no skin in the game. We have skin in the game. One person, it takes one person with a knife, with a sword, with a gun to have attacked someone in our High Commission there. What would have happened? A, B. I totally agree with you. Protests must be allowed. But then there needs to be intelligence on the ground which tells the police what kind of protest and what color that protest will take. Number 3, we're not being petulant. It's time that India stood up and stood be counted. For a long, long time, enough has been done about Khalistan. People in Britain were protecting these people. There have been innumerable instances when people from Khalistan, or the so-called Khalistan movement, have gone and taken shelter in Britain. You know, and you refer to IRA. What could Britain do? IRA killed Lord Mountbatten, didn't they? What could Britain do? Britain was savaged by the IRA. And so we don't want to turn another Britain of that kind. And I'm sorry, sometimes optics are important. It was necessary to tell Britain we are no longer the country that we were in 1946. We are today a great economy. We're a country that needs to stand up and be counted, and that we will not take attacks on our diplomatic missions lightly. That's the argument, Andrew. No one is talking about petulance. No one is talking about childishness.
Answer me that one question, because I'm telling you, from an outsider, as a non-British, as a non-Indian, it looks petulant. My question is this: why is it only the Indians that hark back to the 1940s and 50s? I never hear a British talking about the former time. Somehow you've got to come out of the multi-generational trauma that was British colonialism, and British colonialism in India was terrible in my book. It was terrible.
Andrew, was caused by the British. Okay, if you haven't been able to come out of the trauma that Britain did to Australia, where you were basically an island where they sent their convicts, I'm sorry, we don't stand up like you.
Mr. MacLeod, I mean, with the greatest of respect, sir, that sounded awfully patronizing to see that we have multi-generational trauma. Yes, we do. And this is about our diplomat security, sir. That sounds very patronizing. Almost as if, you know, we are wallowing in some kind of self-pity.
I have to say, with the greatest...
No, we're not. No, we're not. You don't have to get stabbed by a Khalistani to show that you're not full of self-pity.
It's
an obligation. Britain is not doing us a favor. You have to do it.
Britain,
the UK has to do it.
No one in Britain had ever heard of Khalistan until you made a big deal out of it. India is a big, strong and proud country. When India stands up as part of the the Quad, when India stands up as part of the Quad, you make yourself look big on the international standard like you should. When countries like Australia and India and Japan get together to start countering China, when you start to negotiate with the Chinese about your international border in the north, they're the things that great. They're the things. They're the things that great countries should do.
Mr. MacLeod, yes, we are a big country and we have heft, and that's the reason why when we lead, then people are forced to act.
We don't need validation from you.
Like your other
we
guest,
don't need a certificate from you.
Just screaming. All he looks like is a petulant child.
Not at all.
That's all he looks like.
No, that's
yes,
what
you do.
You
You look like a petulant child.
That's what
You're just screaming. Yes.
You're entitled to your opinion.
And that's how you look.
You're entitled to your opinion.
Yes, it is.
People like
correct.
You know, Mr. MacLeod, hold on a second. You're saying, hold on a second. So just a second. We've got somebody with us who has seen up close and personal what the Khalistan movement, or at least they're trying to make it a movement, is really like. Sukhi Chahal, Professor MacLeod here is saying that the whole Khalistan issue is basically nothing. India blew it up. They made it seem bigger than what it is, only because we said...
Don't you dare put words into my mouth.
Isn't that what you said?
The protest. I was talking about the protest in London, the small protest in London. I am not making any comment about the larger Khalistan issue.
Okay.
I'm not.
So the small protest in London, Sukhi Chahal, could have just as well been ignored. Now India is making it seem bigger than what it is.
Yes, the protest, yes, you are. It was a tiny little protest.
Okay, let Mr. Chahal answer you.
One person
Mr. Chahal has an opinion on that protest. India's protest made it seem bigger than what it is. Sukhi Chahal.
I absolutely agree, because there is no movement on ground in the Punjab for the Khalistan, and the Khalistan movement outside is being used. Again, I'm saying again, it's like all these radical Khalistani element. These actors are being used by some very, very interesting parties outside in West, especially outside India. And we always used to claim that it is only ISI. It's not only ISI. These people are very well funded. They are very well managed. And these people, whatever these Khalistani are doing, and they are doing on behalf of the bigger forces. We need to understand that these are not only bunch of these thugs. We cannot say it's only Khalistani. It is a bigger picture. We need to understand. But unfortunately, these Khalistani, and me being a Sikh, actually looks bad on me. Actually, people think actually Khalistan are doing the protest. No, it's India's weakness is being exposed. India, this is not the first time happening. Many times these incidents happen. What India has done now in San Francisco consulate, they came inside your territory. They came inside your periphery and they broke the window. What India has done so far, the Gandhi, the statue in front of the Washington D.C. embassy was broken. What action has been taken? What action has been taken? The people, those who have been beaten up in Vancouver, in London, in Australia, no action has been taken. I think India has also need to learn from the Israel how to handle these people.
Mr. MacLeod, in fact, Mr. Chahal is saying that even stronger action needs to be taken. You think we are overreacting. He thinks that a stronger message needed to be sent.
The Khalistan issue is an issue that the Indian government and the Indian people need to solve within the constitutional and legal means inside India. I have no statement to make one side or the other about Khalistan because I just simply don't know it. You asked me to come on this program to talk about the protest in London, and I'm telling you what your reaction, India's reaction to the protest in London looks like to outside eyes. By removing the security around the British embassy, it looks petulant. By people on Twitter calling to leave the free trade agreement, to leave the Commonwealth, it looks like a baby throwing its toys out of the pram. If you want to leave the Commonwealth, fine. Australia will win more hockey medals. I love watching the hockey between India and Australia. If you want to leave the Commonwealth, fine. Be my guest. The free trade agreement between Britain and India is in mutual benefit. If you want to shoot yourself in the foot by leaving that, go ahead. Be my guest. To be frank, I've been really excited about recently India starting to stand up and create a strong, powerful representation on the international stage, particularly in relations with China, particularly in the Quad. And what you're doing now is you're looking like a baby crying and throwing its toys out of the pram. Yes, it was a small protest. Yes, the person who broke the window should have been arrested and has been arrested. And now you've got people on Twitter saying everyone in Britain who doesn't know about Khalistan is racist. Oh, what a load of rubbish. Most people in Britain don't know about Khalistan because it's not a British issue, for gosh sake.
You know,
it's
the funny thing is that you say that India is overreacting and we're seeming like a petulant baby throwing out its toys.
Yep, yeah,
let's take a look at a few of the British reactions over the years. In January 2019, a 13-year-old girl was arrested in the UK because she was holding a yellow vest pro-Brexit protest. Again, in February 2020, as people gathered to mark departure from EU, they were arrested in London and Glasgow. 6 people were arrested on Brexit night. 5 people were arrested on the 29th of March 2019 for Brexit Day protests. So when it is about Britain, people get picked up, and that's perfectly fine. When India asks for arrest, it is somehow petulant. How is that?
No. You're making a false comparison again. So take those Brexit protests you referred to. Each of those had hundreds of thousands of people at them with less than 10 arrests in each occasion. And you're trying to compare that and compare the police response to, what was it, 20 or 30 people outside the Indian High Commission? This is not comparing apples and oranges. It's comparing an apple orchard with a mandarin in the corner. So you're basically saying that the only reason we should not have a problem is because these were 100 people as opposed to 500 people who were there in Brexit protests. Again, there you go, misinterpreting words again. Let me be clear. The person who broke the window was wrong. Violence should be condemned and he should be arrested, and he was arrested. Absolutely the right thing to do. He'll be charged in due court. He'll go in front of court and he will get the punishment that's warranting the crime. What I am saying, this is how it looks to an outside eye. A small protest. A relatively small amount of damage to the Indian High Commission with an arrest. And in response, there are now calls for the British to leave the free trade agreement, for the Indians to leave the Commonwealth, and removing the security around the British ambassador's residence. That looks petulant, and it's beneath India. India is a bigger and stronger country than to react that way.
Okay, respond to this sort of that. India is looking small-minded and petulant.
Well, look. India has a right to preserve its sovereignty, its image around the world, the safety of those within that building, and the safety of all of those staff members that seek to uphold the operations of that High Commission. For the professor to sit there, I'm simply aghast at just how nonchalant he appears to be about the threat. The Khalistani threat underpins all of the activity of that protest, and it wasn't a protest. We know, and India knows, that this is a movement that is funded, orchestrated, supported, and organized, not just within the UK now, sadly, but all across the world, not just within India, within Canada, within the United States, and sadly, within the UK too. I would ask the professor to look back to the early 80s as this movement took seed and the disasters that befell upon India. This is not a mere protest. This is not about a climate change protest. This is a terrorist threatening organization and a threat that has now become born into its second incarnation. There was a time where the UK thought that Islamists were Britons who weren't going to go beyond merely listening to zealots on the internet and actually act upon them. The UK found out to its cost that they were in fact going to act upon those mere words. We now come to a point where we see vandalism one day, but on the second hand, we're going to see an organization that is going to take root, become empowered by the acts of the Met yesterday, which were absolutely ridiculous, and think to themselves, we can orchestrate further maneuvers in the future. We can do whatever that needs to be done. And as for acting petulant, we have to think about this from India's perspective. If India does nothing, and as it has done in the past under previous governments, these forces come back again and again with more power, more material, more organization, more money, and it is India that bears the brunt of this. So it is not petulant for India to say at this point in time, you know what, we can freeze negotiations on a free trade agreement if we so wish. We can take steps to minimize security in India for the British High Commission, because we can act in kind if we are disrespected. That's not petulant. If
and
the
just by the way, let's be very clear that India has taken these steps without anyone's security being compromised.
Sitting back laughing at your reactions to this.
This is an equivalent step to being disrespected. Why should India not act in such a fashion when the United States does this all the time, for instance? It is now India's time. We're not in the situation where India needs this FTA. It is the UK that needs this FTA. And we also know that British intelligence knew about what was going to happen at the High Commission and did nothing. So
the funny thing is, let me also get in a few viewers, Professor Andrew MacLeod, let me get in a few viewers. What do the Indian public, Indian viewers think? Has the message hit home, or is this an overreaction? We've got Mr. Srinivasan joining us from Chennai. Yes, Mr. Srinivasan.
Hello.
Yes, go on, sir.
Yeah.
Can you go on, Mr. Srinivasan?
Yeah. Thank you. Good evening. Good evening. I only have 2 points to make. I have two points to make. One is I wish that a channel like Times Now has invited somebody from the Britain, then somebody from Australian who speaks for the Britishers. Okay. Number two, if the British government is not able to give proper protection to the Indian High Commission, then maybe the government of India should even think of sending a contingent of commandos from the Indian Army to protect the property and lives of the people our embassy staff in London.
Well, sir, in fact, the SOP is absolutely clear, and which is why we had the police in London patrolling outside. The barricades were put up. The question remains, why didn't they just do it earlier? Why did it take 4 days? Vedant from Mumbai also there with us. Yes, Vedant.
Hello. Yeah, Padmaja.
Go on, sir.
Thanks for giving me time, because first thing is, as an Indian, as a Bharati, I would rather put it that way. These guys who think that they are still colonizing us should jump into the Arabian Sea or Pacific Ocean or the Atlantic and kill themselves. Who is this white guy talking about and telling us that what we are small-minded?
Okay, please, let's be respectful, sir. Let's be respectful of each other, please. Have your say, but please be respectful. Go on.
Sorry?
Please be respectful. Mr. MacLeod is our guest. Let's be respectful.
How can we be respectful for such idiots here?
Okay. I'm going to have to cut you off. I'm sorry. We're just going to have a basic level of respect for all of our guests. Captain Jaspal, yes, go on, please.
Turning to the very light panel, I shall make 4 points where we are lacking. Number A, it is the Britain. By providing a scope in the Cambridge University, they have given a place. The university should be banned. We should cut off all recognition to the Cambridge University, whom they had called, what achievement he had, what business he had to go and talk about India, and his Aadhaar should be suspended. He should be suspended from the parliament, and his citizenship should be cancelled. This is nowhere they want to again take this country into an Italian mafia.
Okay, we're just going to set this aside, sir, and please talk about the issue at hand. Let me also bring in fact, Anirban Banerjee and Vivek Srivastava. At least there is a bipartisan consensus that as far as India's security and our assets are concerned, Vivek Srivastava, there should be no compromise, correct? You would agree with the message and the stance that India has taken?
No, just give me 30. Give me 30 seconds. Give me 30 seconds and please interrupt. It's my humble request to you. Number one, where is the Vishwa Guru? Where is the poster boy of Hindutva, Mr. Rishi Sunak, about whom there were celebrations in the BJP office कि एक हिंदू वहाँ का prime minister बना है? Where are these guys? I partially do agree with Professor Andrew. Yes, it was a very, very rude way of reacting when you take off the security of the British High Commission over here. It is not done. You should have raised the issue diplomatically. You should have summoned the ambassador. You should have told him what is wrong. And since 2014,
which
if this particular government is in power, you could not convince the British that there is a Khalistani undercurrent in United Kingdom. You and Professor Andrew is right. You use the word Quad on the national media day in and day out and say, look, we are with the Australians and the Japanese. Look, we are Vishwagurus. Look, we are great guys. We are challenging China. Then the colonialism doesn't seem, which means it's also a farce. Australia doesn't listen to you. UK doesn't listen to you. Canada doesn't listen to you. There is an undercurrent Khalistani movement going on over there. For the year, you did not address it. You just address the local population over here, and you keep on saying that we are the great guys.
Where did all the goodwill go?
That is what
if the goodwill cannot get us security. Suhail Seth.
But Vivek, the Khalistan movement, my friend, didn't start in 2014. Yeah. It started way ahead. B, if, let's say, the Khalistan movement is being engendered in the United Kingdom, there is only this much and no more that India can do. It's British intelligence. Because please remember, a terrorist has no nationality. The terrorist of Khalistan origin in London will cause damage, and in that process, innocent lives will be lost. So what does a country like India therefore do? You give us a solution. What should we do? Should we just keep quiet and say, oh, let's turn our faces away because we want to be part of a Quad? What do? You have to tell Britain where to get off. And this is one way. You're right. You may not have to remove security, but sometimes optics are important.
We are not smart enough to have good and powerful relations with other nations. We are just coming and bragging about this government and this Prime Minister that we are doing a great job internationally, whereas we are the biggest diplomatic failure. Amritpal Singh was here for months, making statements after statements, and the central agencies were sleeping.
Okay, how does that become, first of all, a diplomatic failure? Can we please stick to one issue and make sense?
Yeah, Amritpal Singh escaping is a failure of Punjab police and Punjab intelligence. You're mixing metaphors. We are talking about the incident that's happened in London.
I am saying that if you had an Amritpal issue raking in this nation for months at length, we should have been internationally active. We should have talked to the countries from where we feel a money trail could have happened. We should have been more active. We should have known what are the repercussions when we take an action, and we should have been smart enough. We were sleeping because we are having a diplomatic failure happening.
Okay, Saurav Dutt, you want to react to this? That this proactiveness could have happened earlier. Saurav Dutt, yes.
Well, has your guest heard of the ISI? Has your guest heard of Justin Trudeau? It is up to India to raise these issues whenever they can in front of Trudeau, in front of Biden, to make sure that we have this Khalistani issue out in the open. As for British intelligence and the police, they knew about what was going to happen at the Indian High Commission, and yet they did absolutely nothing. At this very day, a report has come out shaming the police, saying that they are institutionally homophobic, racist and misogynist. They are shamed in front of the British public to this day. And we saw in Leicester exactly how enfeebled the police was in front of this issue. So why does your guest think that the best way forward is that India should enfeeble itself against the world, somehow pleading for mercies? They should take charge. And the today outside the British High Commission is taking charge. It is showing that we don't need to beg Britain for a FTA. It is the other way around.
And the funny thing is that Professor MacLeod, even though you think that what happened is, not that serious, there are members of parliament in the UK who beg to disagree. They've all written a letter today, and they've said that we are writing to express support in light of the violent disorder and vandalism that took place against the High Commission on Sunday, 19th of March. This behavior must be condemned in all forms, and we welcome the investigation launched by the Met Police. The protest that turned into violence and vandalism was promoted on several social media platforms at least 24 hours beforehand, and it is disappointing that the Home Office failed to ensure adequate protection. So you've got members of parliament in the UK saying that there was an intelligence failure, there was a failure on the part of the police, and the Home Office failed to provide protection. Definitely not something that India can or should ignore.
And I'll say again what I said at the start, and that is all the violence needs to be condemned. the person who broke the window was wrong and should have been arrested and has been arrested. And of course, the Home Secretary knows the issues around Khalistan more than the average British person does, not just because of the intelligence reports she receives, but she herself.
But sir, this is not just about the protest. It is about the blatant disregard for security.
Yeah, and as your other guest has said, the Met has a number of problems at the moment, the Met Police. This isn't the only one. My point is, by India responding instead of with strength, responding with petulance, has embarrassed itself. And I'm disappointed in India because the way you've responded is beneath you.
What would you have done? Imagine that your house is attacked by a violent mob, which may or may not have physically hurt you. What do you expect it to do?
I can answer that question.
Sit back.
I would have responded exactly the way your other guest answered, which is to call in the ambassador, or in this case, the High Commissioner. You make a formal protest, which you do, and you demand that the security is upbeat. I would also have my own security assessment, thinking if this is going to continue, should the Indians do like the Americans did, remove the High Commission to a easily defendable location, because on the Strand, on Aldwych, you cannot barricade that road. It is a major thoroughfare. And if you look at the protests today, yes, at most the police can stop one lane of traffic. So that's what I do, exactly as your other guest said, exactly as your government did do. But if you then go and do things like, well, I'm going to take the security away from the British ambassador then, no, how does it make you look? It doesn't make you look big and strong, like you are, and you should be.
Okay, so what if there's another attack?
Response in kind.
In retrospect, we summon the High Commissioner, then there's another attack. Then what?
Well, if there's another attack, if there's a security failing again, then you need to come down on it. Look, I was in Nairobi at the time that Al-Qaeda bombed up the US. Because you're overreacting like a spoilt child. You're not behaving like the big, strong, brave country that you are. To take the security away from the British ambassador, that's just ludicrous.
All right. Final word. Okay, final word, Suhail says. A strong country is just supposed to sit there and take it on the chin, apparently.
Of the likes of Andrew MacLeod, Bernard Shaw had said, those who can do, those who can't teach. Okay, that's the reality.
I was a soldier. Were you ever in the armed forces? I was a soldier.
No,
were you?
Don't give me that stupid logic. I don't have to be a soldier in order to know who's attacking my embassy. That's the most asinine argument as only a professor of Australian descent, confused living in England, could offer. That's how weak. That's how weak your logic is. Your logic is as weak as your intelligence and your profferings today. You have no clue of what has happened. You have no clue of the Khalistan movement. You're merely a professor who knows how to yak.
Not even brave enough.
Okay, gentlemen, please let's rein it in. Let's rein it in. Here's the thing. I think the message has been given very clearly by India. You may have a difference of opinion, Professor MacLeod, but India is definitely not going to sit there and simply keep taking it on the chin, especially when they are very clear that this was in blatant violation of SOPs which are already in place. No country would have allowed UK to get away with it. Why should India? And clearly the UK has acknowledged that there was something amiss, because the same police, the same barricades, which despite of all the problems the Met is facing, were put in place today after India just leaned a little. Let's hope no such flaws are allowed to creep in the future. Thanks very much all gentlemen for joining me.